They thought I was gone forever. They thought they could bury me, my name, and every dream I once dared to hold. But death wasn't the end. It was my beginning. When I opened my eyes again, in the same fragile body they betrayed, I made a silent vow. I would never be the naive girl they discarded. This time, I would make them all pay. The fiancé who shattered my trust, the best friend who sold my secrets, the family who turned their backs. And yet, in the ashes of my revenge, I never expected the one man I should have hated most to look at me like I was everything he ever wanted. My name is Elise, and this is the story of how I turned betrayal into my greatest weapon. I wasn't always this cold. Once, I believed in love so fiercely it blinded me to everything else. My name was Elise Hartwell, daughter of the Hartwell estate, raised with every privilege that should have protected me. But money can't shield you from knives if the people closest to you are the ones holding them. In my first life, I was engaged to Adrian Crane. He was the heir to a powerful shipping dynasty, charismatic, brilliant, and calculating in ways I pretended not to see. Our engagement had been arranged since childhood, our futures carefully mapped out by two ambitious families who saw our union as the perfect merger. I thought it was love. I thought the late-night conversations, the stolen kisses in quiet corridors, the whispered promises, were real. But love was just another currency to Adrian, a bargaining chip he played flawlessly. It was my 23rd birthday when I first saw the cracks in the fairy tale. My best friend, Celeste, arrived late to the party I'd planned for months. She wore a red dress that clung to her figure like a second skin, her hair artfully tousled as if she'd come straight from some secret tryst. I remember wondering why she avoided my gaze when she handed me her gift, a slim velvet box containing a delicate gold bracelet. "Happy birthday," she said, her voice so steady. I had no idea she'd been the one sharing Adrian's bed, while she called me her sister. The betrayal unraveled slowly at first. A whispered conversation behind a half-closed door. A carelessly discarded scarf in Adrian's study. A letter I wasn't supposed to find. "I can't wait until she's out of the way," Celeste had written. "Then everything will be ours." I confronted Adrian, trembling so hard my voice cracked. He didn't deny it. He only smiled, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum over something she could never understand. "You are never going to be more than a means to an end, Elise," he said. "Your father's shares, your name, your connections. It's all that ever mattered." "But you said you loved me," I whispered, voice raw. He tilted his head, studying me with those glacial gray eyes that once made me feel chosen. "I did what I had to do. And now, you'll do what you were born to do, step aside." He didn't even look back when he left me there, shaking. 2 days later, the scandal erupted. An anonymous leak accused me of embezzlement, hundreds of thousands siphoned from the Hartwell accounts. My father believed it without question. My family shut me out overnight, too worried about their reputation to hear my pleas. On the last night of my life, I stood in the rain outside the gates of my childhood home, locked out, with nothing but a suitcase and the realization that no one was coming to save me. My mother wouldn't answer the door. My father's voice, cold over the intercom, told me not to come back. I remember thinking that I'd never felt so alone, so expendable. I rented a dingy motel room on the edge of town, unable to sleep, replaying every memory in my mind. All the smiles, all the gentle touches, every perfect lie. When dawn came, I felt as if my heart had finally given up. My pulse fluttered weakly, my chest tight and hollow. Maybe it was a broken heart, or maybe the pills I swallowed were finally taking effect. The last thing I saw was the red digits on the cheap alarm clock blinking 6:47 a.m. And then darkness. For a moment, I believed it was over, that they'd won, and my story had ended as a cautionary tale. But the universe wasn't done with me. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my old bedroom, days before the betrayal had unfolded. My skin was warm, my heart was beating, and my mind carried every memory of how they'd destroyed me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling something cold and electric unfurl in my chest. If fate had granted me another chance, I wasn't going to waste it. They had no idea the girl they'd broken was reborn with vengeance in her veins. When I woke, the air smelled the same, faint lilac drifting in from the garden, the polished mahogany of my vanity table, the lingering sweetness of a life I'd thought was mine. Only this time, it was all an illusion I could finally see through. I slipped from the bed, moving like a stranger in my own skin. My reflection in the mirror looked soft, innocent, fragile. I almost laughed. That girl was dead. I touched the glass, tracing the outline of my cheek. My fingers didn't tremble. Not anymore. I checked the date on the slim gold watch Adrian had given me the year before. 3 days before my 23rd birthday. 3 days before everything would collapse. Not this time. The first thing I did was open the hidden compartment in my closet floor. In my first life, I never thought to look there. I believed my family staff was loyal, that no one would ever plant evidence against me. But now I knew better. I lifted the panel, and there it was. A thin folder stuffed with forged bank documents implicating me in embezzlement. My hands curled around the edges of the folder. I could almost feel the betrayal burning through my palms. Celeste's neat handwriting on the corner. Delivered to Mr. Crane. So it was true. She and Adrian had planned everything, down to the details of my destruction. I closed the compartment and locked it. No one would find it this time. No one would use it against me. The second thing I did was call my family's lawyer. In my first life, I hadn't dared to question my father's judgment, hadn't thought to protect myself legally. Now I knew exactly which strings to pull. "Ms. Hartwell," he answered, confused by the early call. "Is everything all right?" "It will be," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "I need you to prepare a statement verifying the security of our family accounts. I want it notarized and ready by tomorrow." "A statement? May I ask why?" "Because people are going to try to ruin me," I said simply. "And I'm not going to let them." I hung up before he could respond. By the time the sun climbed over the hedgerows, my mind was already cataloging every moment I remembered from the first time around. Adrian's late-night meetings. Celeste's sudden disappearances. My father's quickness to believe the worst. I would not be blindsided again. At breakfast, my parents eyed me warily as I slipped into my seat. My father sipped his coffee, frowning at a stack of reports. My mother smoothed her napkin over her lap, the same nervous gesture she always did when she was about to scold me for some imagined failure. "Elise," she began, "you've been looking pale lately. Are you unwell?" I lifted my gaze and let her see the steel there. "I'm perfectly fine." She blinked, startled. I had never spoken to her that way. I used to beg for her approval, scramble to be the perfect daughter. But not anymore. I turned to my father. "I need to discuss the Hartwell accounts with you." His brows drew together. "What about them?" "You'll see," I said softly. "Soon." I almost pitied them. They were so used to the pliant Elise, the girl who would sacrifice everything to keep the family from fracturing. But this time, I had no intention of shielding anyone from the consequences of their choices. When breakfast ended, I slipped away to my study and sat at the old roll-top desk where I'd once written letters to Adrian. I remembered how my hand would tremble with excitement as I penned little notes. "I love you more than you'll ever know." I picked up a fresh sheet of stationery and began writing again. Only this time, it wasn't a love letter. "To Adrian Crane, I know what you're planning. I know about Celeste, about the documents you forged, about every lie you whispered behind closed doors. You believe you've already won, that I'm nothing more than a pawn you can discard. But this time, you've underestimated me. I won't beg. I won't break. When you finally realize what you've lost, it will be far too late to get it back." I folded the letter carefully and sealed it in an envelope. My pulse was steady, my breathing calm. In another life, I would have been weeping. Now I felt nothing but clarity. I tucked the letter into my desk drawer, ready to deliver when the moment was right. At dusk, I stood by my window and watched Adrian's car pull into the drive. My heart should have twisted at the sight of him, tall, elegant, the man I had once planned to marry. But all I felt was a cool, measured satisfaction, because I already knew exactly how I would destroy him. Adrian strolled up the steps like a king returning to his palace, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. His confidence was almost admirable. He truly believed I was still his naive, trusting bride-to-be. I pressed my palm to the glass, watching as he exchanged a polite nod with the butler. My pulse remained steady, though my memories flickered like old film, his lips on my hair, his hands warm on my shoulders, his voice promising forever. How easily he lied. He didn't see me at first. I waited in the drawing room, the soft lamplight casting long shadows across the polished floor. When he finally stepped inside, our eyes met, and for a moment, I almost forgot how much I hated him. "Elise," he said, as if my name were something precious. "You look radiant tonight." I wondered how many times he'd rehearsed those words before slipping into my bed in my first life. "Adrian," I replied evenly, "we need to talk." His brows lifted. "Talk." He came closer, unbuttoning his coat. "Darling, whatever it is, I'm sure it can wait." "No," I said, my voice like ice. "It can't." He stilled, the faintest flicker of confusion passing across his face. He didn't like when I asserted myself. He preferred me pliant, adoring. I gestured to the sofa. "Seat." He obeyed, though wariness edged into his perfect features. I remained standing, needing the height to look down on him for once. "I've been thinking," I began. about how little I know of your business dealings. His smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. My business is exactly that, mine. I tilted my head. And yet you've always been so eager to involve yourself in my family's affairs. My father's investments, my trust fund. He licked his lips, clearly considering how much to reveal. Elise, you're overthinking. You've always been sensitive. Sensitive, I repeated softly. Is that what you called me the night you told Celeste I was easy to manipulate? His smile froze. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. You're mistaken, he said finally, his tone flat. I let the moment hang between us, savoring the way his composure cracked. Then I moved closer and leaned down, my voice a velvet threat. Try me again, Adrian, I whispered. Light in my face. I dare you. He swallowed. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. I straightened and walked to the window, giving him my back. I'm tired, I said calmly. You should go. His voice followed me, tight with frustration. We're engaged. You can't treat me like some stranger you've dismissed. I turned, meeting his gaze with a smile I knew was unsettling. Watch me. He stood abruptly, the mask slipping from his features. For an instant, I glimpsed the real Adrian, the ruthless man who had destroyed me once. You'll regret this, he said, voice low. No, y murmura. This time, it will be you who regrets everything. He left without another word. I listened to the front door slam and let out a slow, measured breath. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. When the house had gone still again, I retrieved the hidden folder of evidence from my closet. It wasn't enough to simply survive this time. I would dismantle every last plan he and Celeste had made. I spent hours copying the documents, marking dates, names, and transactions I recognized. Every line was a piece of the noose I would slip around Adrian's throat when the time came. By dawn, I had assembled a file so damning that even my father couldn't deny it. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. Proof of the affair, proof of the conspiracy to ruin me. And that meant luring Celeste into the open. Later that morning, I sent her a note written in my soft, trusting hand. Celeste, I've been feeling so uncertain lately. I don't know who to trust anymore. Can we meet? I need your advice. In my first life, she would have rushed to comfort me, all saccharine sweetness. This time, I would watch every flicker of guilt and calculation in her eyes. I would let her think she still had the upper hand. And when she finally realized I'd outplayed them all, it would be too late. I sealed the note and handed it to the footman with instructions to deliver it immediately. As I stood in the doorway, the morning sun spilling over the dewy lawn, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel in my first life. Power. I was no longer Elise Hartwell, the girl who had been broken. I was Elise Reborn. And this was only the beginning. Celeste arrived precisely at noon, punctual as ever, wearing her favorite powder blue dress. She'd always dressed to look innocent, soft colors, delicate fabrics, so no one would suspect the venom hidden beneath the surface. I waited for her in the garden pavilion, where we'd shared countless afternoon teas. In my first life, I would have clung to her hand, pouring out every worry, never suspecting she was sharpening the blade behind my back. But today, as I rose to greet her, my smile was an echo of all the times she'd pretended to care. Elise, she said, voice rich with practiced concern. You sounded so distressed in your note. What's happened? I gestured for her to sit, then poured tea with steady hands. I've been unsettled, I said carefully. Lately, I feel as if nothing is as it seems. Her blue eyes widened, lashes fluttering. Oh, darling, you're overthinking again. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face as she tasted her tea. In another life, I'd have missed the way her gaze flicked briefly to my left hand, searching for the engagement ring Adrian had given me. Don't worry, I thought. You'll both regret ever thinking I was too blind to see you. I just can't stop wondering, I continued softly, if everyone has been honest with me. Celeste placed her teacup down with a quiet click. What do you mean? About everything, I said. About Adrian, about my family's finances, about who I can trust. She tilted her head, her smile fixed. You can always trust me. I almost laughed. Instead, I reached out, brushing my fingers lightly over her wrist. Can I, Celeste? Truly. For the briefest second, something flickered in her expression. Annoyance? Worry? She was too skilled to let it linger. You're scaring me, she whispered. Is Adrian putting these ideas in your head? You know he'd never hurt you. In another life, I might have crumpled at her feet, grateful for her reassurances. But this time, I watched her carefully, searching for cracks in her mask. Would you tell me, I asked, voice low, if you knew something that would hurt me? Her lips parted. Of course, she breathed. You're my dearest friend. Liar. I set my teacup aside, heart steady as a metronome. I hope that's true. She swallowed. Elise, what is this really about? I let the silence grow heavy between us, the way she had so many times before when she was deciding how best to deceive me. I suppose, I said finally. I've realized that loving people isn't always enough to keep them loyal. Her eyes darkened a fraction. And what will you do if someone betrays you? I smiled, slow and cold. I'll make sure they never do it again. For the first time, she looked genuinely unnerved. Her fingers drummed against the table before she caught herself. You're different lately, she said carefully. Am I? You seem stronger. I held her gaze, letting her see a glimpse of the woman she'd helped create. Perhaps I am. She rose abruptly. I should go. I stood with her, resisting the urge to savor her discomfort. Thank you for coming. Her hand hovered in the air as if she meant to touch my arm, but she thought better of it. Instead, she left with a murmured goodbye, her steps quickening as she disappeared down the path. I watched her go, the faintest tremor of satisfaction rippling through me. For once, she was the one afraid of what I might do. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Later that evening, I received a note from Adrian, delivered by his driver, sealed with his family crest. I broke the wax with a flick of my fingernail. Elise, we need to speak privately. You're making a mistake you won't be able to undo. Come to the Crane estate tomorrow. I'll explain everything. I traced the elegant script, remembering how many times I'd believed his words. But this time, there would be no pleading, no apologies. Only strategy. I placed the note in the same drawer as the evidence I'd gathered. Let them think I was hesitating, uncertain, vulnerable. Let them think they still had a chance to salvage their plan. The truth was, I already knew exactly how this would end. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the wind rustling the curtains. I should have felt lonely. Instead, I felt a grim, thrilling certainty. Every moment they spent underestimating me brought them one step closer to ruin. I closed my eyes, imagining Adrian's face when he realized he'd lost everything he valued. And Celeste, sweet, faithless Celeste, would discover just how dangerous the girl she'd betrayed could become. The Crane estate looked the same as it always had, grand, imposing, the sort of place that was designed to make visitors feel small. As the car rolled up the sweeping drive, I let my gaze drift over the limestone facade, the ornate wrought iron gates. In another life, I'd imagined living here as Adrian's wife. Fate had a sharper sense of irony than I'd ever realized. I stepped out without waiting for the driver to open my door, my heels clicking against the stones with deliberate confidence. 2 footmen bowed as I passed, their eyes flicking to my face, perhaps puzzled by the calm in my expression. Adrian was waiting in his study, a room paneled in dark wood and filled with trophies, prizes he'd collected over a lifetime of conquest. As I entered, he looked up from his ledger, surprise flickering across his features before he smoothed it away. Elise, he said, rising. You came. Of course, I replied coolly. I was curious to hear your excuses. His mouth tightened, but he gestured to the chair across from his.
Seat.
Please. I didn't. I remained standing, letting the silence stretch until he was forced to look me directly in the eye. You've been unpredictable lately, he began carefully. It's unlike you. I suppose dying changes a person, I said softly, before I could stop myself. His brow furrowed.
What?
I waved a hand. Nothing you'd understand. His jaw flexed, the faintest crack in his composure. You're angry. I accept that. But whatever you think you know, I know everything, I interrupted. About the forged documents. About Celeste. About the way you planned to strip me of my name, my wealth, and leave me ruined. His face went still, the mask slipping.
Who told you that?
You did, I said, and for one perfect moment, confusion and fear tangled in his eyes. Elise, he began, his voice turning gentle, almost pleading, you're overreacting. You've always been emotional. You let your imagination. I'm not the one who lied, I snapped. Not the one who pretended to love someone while plotting to destroy her. He exhaled slowly, steepling his fingers. And what do you intend to do with these accusations? I smiled faintly. Oh, Adrian. You're still under the illusion that I'm here to warn you. I'm not. He rose, his expression darkening. Careful, Elise. You have no idea what you're playing at. I have every idea, I said. And I'm no longer afraid. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he moved around the desk, stopping just in front of me. His cologne was the same, sharp, expensive, cloying. You think you can beat me, he murmured. But you've never been capable of real ruthlessness. He lifted his hand as if to cup my cheek, an old habit meant to soften me. I caught his wrist before he could touch me. I'm not that girl anymore, I said quietly. His eyes searched mine, as if he might still find her hiding there. But she was gone. He let his hand fall. If you go through with this, he said softly, I'll have no choice but to retaliate. I'm counting on it. I turned and walked out before he could reply. My heart was hammering, but not with fear. With exhilaration. Outside, the wind lifted my hair, cool against my flushed skin. I'd thought coming here might weaken my resolve. That seeing him would remind me of everything I'd once loved. Instead, it only solidified my purpose. The Elise who had loved Adrian Crane was dead, and the woman who had replaced her was going to dismantle everything he held dear. That evening, I returned home to find Celeste waiting in my sitting room, her eyes wide and anxious. Elise, she cried, springing to her feet. I heard you want to see Adrian. I let the door click shut behind me. I did. She wrung her hands. What did he say? Enough, I said coolly, to confirm everything I suspected. Her breath hitched. You can't believe. I believe what I've seen with my own eyes. I cut in. And I know exactly where your loyalties lie. She flinched as if I'd struck her. I don't understand this cruelty. I'm your friend. No, I said softly. You never were. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but I saw them for what they were, another performance. She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. Save it, I whispered. The games are over. She stared at me, her lip trembling. What are you going to do? I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial hush. I'm going to destroy you both. Her face drained of color, and for the first time, I felt almost merciful. Almost. The morning after I confronted Celeste, the estate hummed with a strange energy. Servants paused in doorways, whispering behind gloved hands. My mother's voice carried down the hall, brittle with anxiety. Even my father, who rarely emerged from his study, appeared for breakfast, eyeing me as if he no longer recognized his own daughter. I took my seat at the head of the long table, lifting my teacup as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. They just didn't know it yet. Elise, my father began carefully, I've received word that you've been inquiring into certain family accounts. I set my cup down with a soft clink. I have. He cleared his throat. That's not your concern. I met his gaze without flinching. It is when those accounts are being used as collateral in Adrian Crane's schemes. A flush rose in his neck. How dare you accuse? I'm not accusing. I'm informing you. I interrupted, my voice like the edge of a blade. If you wish to protect the Hartwell name, you'll distance yourself from Adrian immediately.
My mother gasped.
My father's hand tightened on the table, knuckles pale. Your engagement is not only a family arrangement, he hissed. It's a business alliance. You will not jeopardize that because you're nursing some girlish grievance. I'm not a girl, I said softly. Not anymore. I rose, smoothing the front of my dress. If you won't protect what's ours, I will. As I left the room, I felt their eyes on my back. Once, their disappointment would have gutted me. Now it was nothing more than background noise. By afternoon, I had an appointment at the offices of our family's lawyer, Mr. Aldridge was a thin, nervous man who had always looked at me as if I were a fragile ornament. Not today. He ushered me into his office, clearing his throat. Miss Hartwell, you asked for documentation. Yes. I folded my hands on his polished desk. I want a full audit of every transfer my fiancé has authorized in my name. He adjusted his spectacles, blinking. My father doesn't speak for me, I interrupted. Prepare the documents. I'll sign them personally. His pen trembled as he made notes. When I stood to leave, he rose, his expression uncertain. If I may, Miss Hartwell, be careful. I paused in the doorway. Careful. Men like Adrian Crane don't respond well to being cornered. I met his gaze evenly. Neither do women who have nothing left to lose. When I returned home, a letter was waiting on my writing desk, unsealed, as if someone had hoped to intercept it. Elise, I can't believe you'd betray me like this. After everything we've shared. After everything we planned. If you think you can walk away unscathed, you're mistaken. Meet me tonight. One last time. You owe me that much. Adrian, I traced my finger over the ink, feeling the old memories stir. His hands on my waist, his voice in my ear, his promises like poison-laced honey. And then I remembered the cold floor of that motel room, the pills dissolving on my tongue, the crushing realization that he had never loved me. I folded the letter with deliberate care and placed it in my pocket. Let him think I was coming to beg. Let him think I was still that girl. Night fell quickly, the air sharp with the promise of rain. I dressed plainly, in a dark wool cloak and gloves. No jewelry, no perfume, nothing he could later claim I'd left behind as proof of some desperation. At the Crane estate, The butler looked startled to see me. "Miss Hartwell," he began, but I brushed past him without a word. I found Adrian in the library, standing before the tall windows as lightning flickered across the sky. He turned when I entered, his eyes shadowed. "Elise," he said softly. "I'm glad you came." I said nothing. He moved closer, studying my face as if searching for weakness. "You've been making a spectacle of yourself. Everyone is talking." "Good," I murmured. "Let them." His jaw tightened. "This isn't who you are." I tilted my head.
No, it's who you made me.
His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he didn't bother to hide the cold calculation beneath his charm. "You think you're clever. You think you can outmaneuver me." "I don't think," I said. "I know." A muscle ticked in his cheek. "I'm warning you, walk away now, and I might be willing to forget this." "I'm not the one who will be forgotten," I whispered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The storm raged outside, the windows rattling in their frames. Then he reached into his jacket and produced a slim black folder. "You forced my hand." I watched him calmly. "What is that?" "Proof," he said, voice low, "that you've been siphoning funds from your father's estate. Proof you'll never recover from." My lips curved into a slow, cold smile. "Adrian," I said softly, "you really should have checked that compartment before you came here." His brows drew together. I stepped forward, close enough to see the uncertainty in his eyes. "I already took it back." His face went pale. "And now," I murmured, "you have nothing." For the first time, Adrian looked truly afraid. His hand flexed around the folder as if he could will the forged documents into legitimacy by sheer force of will. "What have you done?" he demanded, voice low and ragged. I smiled faintly. "I took back what you stole. The real records are safe, and the rest, well, you'll discover soon enough how empty your threats have become." His eyes flashed, and he threw the folder onto the desk with a dull slap. "You think this is over? You think I'll simply let you walk away?" I tilted my head, studying him. Even now, he was beautiful in that cruel, polished way that once captivated me. But all I saw was a hollow man desperate to keep control slipping through his fingers. "No," I said softly. "I don't think you'll let me walk away. But it doesn't matter." He moved around the desk, so quickly I almost didn't see him coming. His hand shot out, wrapping around my wrist with bruising force. "Listen to me," he hissed. "You don't understand what you're doing. If you destroy me, you destroy yourself. You'll never recover." I looked down at his hand, then back up into his eyes. "You already destroyed me once." He flinched. "Now," I continued, my voice steady, "I'm just returning the favor." His grip loosened. I stepped back and smoothed my sleeve as if he were nothing more than an inconvenience. "Elise," he said, softer now, trying to slip back into the role of the concerned lover. "We were meant to build something together. Think about everything you're throwing away." I turned away, unable to look at him a moment longer. "I have thought about it," I said quietly, "and I'm choosing freedom." He exhaled, and in that moment, I knew he finally believed me. I left him standing there, the storm crashing around us. As I stepped outside, rain pelted my face in cold sheets. Each drop felt like absolution. By the time I returned to my carriage, my hair was soaked, but I didn't care. My hands were steady. My heart was unshakable. That night, I sent letters to every influential figure in our social circle, copies of the documents I'd recovered, proof of Adrian's schemes, a detailed account of the funds he'd siphoned from my family under the guise of investment. I signed each letter with my name. Not the name of a victim, but the name of a woman who had finally stopped being afraid. The fallout began the next morning. I awoke to the sound of raised voices downstairs, my father shouting, my mother sobbing. The front hall was crowded with messengers and staff carrying letters bearing my seal. When I stepped onto the landing, every face turned to me. "Elise," my father thundered, waving one of the letters in the air. "What have you done?" I descended the stairs slowly, feeling as though I were walking through the final act of a play I'd already memorized. "I've told the truth," I said simply. "You've ruined everything," he shouted, face purple with rage. Our reputation, I cut in, was already ruined the moment you trusted Adrian Crane more than your own daughter." The room fell silent. My mother covered her mouth, tears slipping through her fingers. "I've spent my entire life trying to be what you wanted," I continued. "Perfect, compliant, useful. And where did it leave me? Alone, disposable." My father's shoulders sagged. He looked old, defeated. "You don't understand." "No," I said, my voice trembling only slightly. "You don't understand. I died because of what you all allowed to happen." His eyes widened, but before he could speak, I turned and walked away. I didn't need their understanding anymore. That evening, as the scandal spread like wildfire through every drawing room in the city, I received a single note slipped under my door. It wasn't from Adrian.
It was from Celeste.
Meet me. Midnight. The old rose garden. I read the words twice, my heart beating slower, colder. I knew it could be a trap. I knew she was desperate. But I also knew I had to finish what I started. At midnight, the garden was silent, the roses black in the moonlight. Celeste stood among them, her pale dress billowing in the wind. When she saw me, she took a step forward, her eyes wide and luminous. "Elise," she whispered, "please." I held up a hand.
"Don't," I said.
She swallowed, tears gleaming. I never wanted it to end like this. Neither did I. We stared at each other for a long moment, two girls who had once been inseparable, now standing on opposite sides of a chasm they'd carved themselves. "I loved you," she said brokenly. I closed my eyes. For just a moment, I let myself mourn the friendship I'd lost.
The trust.
The laughter. The years. Then I opened them again, clear and resolute. "But you loved yourself more," I whispered. Celeste's face crumpled. "Elise, you don't understand what he promised me," she said, her voice cracking. He told me that if I helped him, I'd finally have everything I deserved." I felt something in my chest twist, not pity, but a weary recognition. "And what was that?" I asked softly. "Money? Status? His affection? All of it," she whispered. "You were always the golden girl. You had everything handed to you while I stood in your shadow."
Do you know what that feels like?
I looked at her for a long moment. In another life, I might have wept with her, begged her to remember what we'd been to each other. But I wasn't that girl anymore. "Yes," I said.
Ido.
Her breath caught. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because I won't let you do it to me again." She stepped closer, her hands outstretched. "Please, please, Elise. If you expose me, if you expose all of this, I'll have nothing." I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "You already had nothing the moment you chose to betray me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was weak. I didn't look away. I was weak too, but not anymore." Lightning split the sky behind her, illuminating the garden in a flash of silver. For a second, she looked like a ghost. Something fragile and already gone. "Then this is really the end," she said, her voice so small I almost didn't hear it. I nodded. "Yes." She turned away, covering her face with her hands. I waited, expecting another plea, another desperate bargain. But she only stood there, her shoulders shaking. I left her in the garden, the roses trembling in the wind. As I walked back to the house, I felt something close to peace. The girl who had trusted too easily, loved too blindly, she was finally gone. And in her place stood a woman who understood that forgiveness was not always owed, and sometimes the only way to heal was to burn everything down. When I returned to my room, I found another letter waiting. The handwriting was Adrian's, bold and slashing. "You've made your choice. If you think I'll let you destroy me, you're more foolish than I believed." I set the letter aside. He still thought he could frighten me, that he could pull me back into his orbit with threats and anger. But the only power he ever had over me was the love I'd once felt. And that love was ashes. The next morning, the city erupted. My letters had reached every corner of society, every newspaper editor and rival family eager to feast on the Crane downfall. Adrian's carefully constructed image of success and integrity cracked under the weight of the truth. Rumors spread faster than any official statement about his debts, his lies, the quiet investigations into his dealings. My family's name was mentioned, but always in the same breath as my refusal to cover his crimes. By afternoon, my father called me to his study. He looked up from a newspaper with hollow eyes. "Elise," he began hoarsely, "I don't know whether to be furious with you or grateful." "Then don't be either," I said quietly. "Just know I did what I had to." He pressed a hand over his mouth, as if steadying himself. "You've ended any possibility of reconciliation." I lifted my chin. "Good." His hand fell away, and for the first time in my life, he didn't look at me as a disappointment. Just a stranger he could no longer control. When I left the study, I felt light, almost unbearably so. As if all the weight I'd carried for years had finally slipped from my shoulders. Late that evening, I received one final visitor. The butler knocked softly before opening the door. "Miss Hartwell," he murmured. "Mr. Crane is here." I didn't flinch. "Tell him I'm unavailable. He says he will wait as long as it takes." I closed my eyes, exhaling a slow breath. "Then he'll wait forever." The butler hesitated. "Shall I have him escorted out?" I opened my eyes. "Yes." And just like that, the last tether snapped. As the door closed, I stood at the window, watching the storm roll across the hills. In the glass, my reflection looked almost unfamiliar, a woman with clear eyes and a steady gaze. For the first time in either of my lives, I belonged to no one. The following days passed in a blur of rumors and revelations. Everywhere I turned, I heard whispers about Adrian's collapse, about Celeste's sudden disappearance from society, about the Heartwell daughter who had single-handedly shattered the illusion everyone believed in. I expected to feel triumphant. I had won, but the victory was quieter than I imagined. There was no parade, no grand celebration, just an endless, echoing stillness where all my old dreams had lived. I spent my mornings in my father's library, reviewing the financial records he'd finally handed over. My afternoons were consumed by letters, offers from distant relatives who suddenly remembered their affection, inquiries from other wealthy families eager to align themselves with a Heartwell who was no longer a liability. And yet, none of it mattered. Not really. One evening, as dusk pooled in the corners of the room, I sat alone by the fire, a ledger open in my lap. The flames blurred in my vision as exhaustion settled deep in my bones. I didn't hear the door open until the butler cleared his throat softly. "Miss Heartwell," he murmured, "you have a visitor." My heart sank. "If it's Adrian, I've already given instructions." "It's not Mr. Crane," he interrupted gently. "It's Miss Celeste." My eyes closed. I had hoped she would vanish quietly, that she would fade into the background like a bad memory. But some part of me knew she wouldn't.
Not yet.
"Show her in," I said finally. When Celeste entered, she looked nothing like the girl who used to stand by my side at every party. Her dress was wrinkled, her eyes hollow, her hair pinned back in a rush. "Elise," she began, her voice raw. "Please." I didn't rise. I didn't offer her tea, or pretend we were still friends. She took a hesitant step forward. "I've lost everything." I waited. "My family, they've cut me off. Adrian won't speak to me. Everyone knows what we did." Her hands twisted together, pale and trembling. I have nowhere to go." I studied her face, searching for even a flicker of the girl I'd loved. There was nothing left but desperation. "What is it you expect me to say?" I asked quietly. Her breath caught. "I don't know. That you forgive me? That you can't hate me forever?" I set the ledger aside. "Celeste, I don't hate you." Her eyes widened, hope flaring. "But I don't love you anymore either." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "You can't mean that." "I mean every word," I said softly. "I wish you peace. But I don't wish you back into my life." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I thought we were family." "So did I," I whispered. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I watched, feeling nothing but a cool, detached sorrow. Once, I would have wrapped my arms around her, promised we'd find a way through it together. But that girl was gone. When her crying subsided, she looked up at me, eyes red and pleading. "If you ever change your mind," I shook my head. "I won't." She swallowed, her lip trembling. "Then goodbye." "Goodbye, Celeste." She turned and walked out without another word. The door closed behind her with a final, hollow click. I sat in the quiet for a long time, letting the stillness settle around me like a shroud. It was over. Truly over. The storm had passed, and all that remained were the ruins and the space to build something new. Later that night, I stood on the terrace, watching the moon climb above the gardens. A soft breeze stirred the ivy along the walls. I thought of everything I had lost and everything I had reclaimed. No one owned me anymore. Not Adrian, not Celeste, not even my family. I had burned every bridge that led back to the life that killed me. And in the distance, I saw the faintest glimmer of something I hadn't dared to imagine in so long. Freedom. Weeks passed, and the scandal finally began to fade, replaced by newer gossip and fresher tragedies. The city had a short memory for other people's ruin. In the end, Adrian's empire crumbled under the weight of his arrogance. His investors abandoned him, creditors circled like vultures, and whispers said he fled to the coast to salvage what little he could. I never saw him again. Celeste sent one final letter. I didn't open it. I had read enough of her words to last several lifetimes. My parents tiptoed around me now, unsure how to treat the daughter they no longer recognized. My father still tried, in a stiff, awkward way, to reclaim some control. But each time he summoned me to discuss our family's future, I listened without answering, my silence more eloquent than any argument. My mother, brittle and exhausted, spent her days in her rooms, unable to look me in the eye. The house felt emptier than I remembered. Or perhaps I was simply more aware of how hollow it had always been. One morning, as dawn spilled gold across the marble floors, I packed a single valise and descended the grand staircase. The butler appeared, startled. "Miss Heartwell," he said carefully, Shall I call for the carriage? I shook my head.
No.
I'll walk. He looked at me as though he wanted to say something, some blessing or apology, but thought better of it. Instead, he stepped aside, and I crossed the threshold without looking back. Outside, the air smelled of rain and something fresher I couldn't quite name. I drew a deep breath, feeling it fill the emptiness inside me. At the gates, I paused. For a moment, I remembered the girl who had stood here on the night her world fell apart. I remembered how cold she was, how small. I wished I could have touched her shoulder, whispered in her ear that she would not be lost forever. I closed my eyes. Goodbye, I thought, to every version of me that loved too much and asked too little. Then I opened them and walked into the dawn. I didn't know exactly where I was going. It didn't matter. Every step was mine. Every choice finally my own. I rented a modest house at the edge of the city. Small, sunlit, with ivy climbing the brick walls. The neighbors were polite but uninterested in my past. I liked it that way. In the quiet hours, I began to rediscover the things I had once loved before Adrian and Celeste had stolen my voice. I read books I never had time for, sketched in the garden, and learned to cook my own meals. Simple things. Ordinary things. Things that belonged only to me. Occasionally, letters arrived, proposals, apologies, invitations. I placed them all, unopened, in a wooden box I kept in the hall closet. Let the past knock at my door. I owed it nothing. Sometimes I caught myself wondering what might have happened if I had never died. If I had married Adrian, if I had let Celeste stay in my life, if I had kept playing the role everyone expected. I knew the answer. I would have vanished by degrees until there was nothing left of me. Rebirth is not always the work of miracles or magic. Sometimes it's simply the refusal to let your story end where someone else decided it should. One evening, as I stood at my kitchen window watching the sunset, I realized I wasn't thinking about them anymore. Not Adrian's face. Not Celeste's betrayal. Not my father's disappointment. I was thinking of tomorrow. Of the 1,000 small beginnings waiting for me. I smiled, not because I had won, but because I had survived. Because in the end, survival was the quietest, most defiant victory of all. My name is Elise Hartwell. And this is how I was reborn not once but twice. Once when the world tried to end me. And again when I chose to live.